Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to the channel with the most hated guinea pig on YouTube. So today we're going to be talking about the new series that just dropped on Netflix, Seige War for Cybertron. Now I actually went through and I watched the first episode, and just to make sure that I was getting a proper understanding of what the series was going to be like, I decided to go through the entire second episode as well. Now, first off, we're going to start with how did the characters really look as opposed to what we've seen in the trailers. The trailers were pretty much exactly what you see in the show, albeit it does look a little bit better than some of the trailers had shown because some of the trailers just didn't have the clarity that the show itself actually has. The show, the animation in it is very well done. There's all kinds of extras that they're including. Now, I'm not going to get into any spoilers. I want you to be able to see this show for yourself and enjoy it, but I want you to be able to understand what you're going to be in for when you do decide to watch it. So there's a lot of extras that are in there. Of course, one of the big things is like all the Autobots and all the Decepticons, they look battle weary. They look beat up. They look like they've actually been through a war, as opposed to a lot of the other series that you've seen out there, other than the old 1986 movie where they look kind of beat up. But most of the other series, they showed them in a pretty pristine state. That is not what you get here. You are getting very gritty, very raw, very dirty war feeling to this series. And there's a lot of little extras that they added, like there's like clicks and whirs that you hear when the Autobots are moving their arms or their legs and everything, and you get that nice thunking metal sound, that hollow thunking metal sound every time they take a step or they hit their hands together. It's incredibly well done. Now, some of the voices are a little bit different than you probably remember from some of the older cartoons, but that's really not a problem here because the voices actually still are fairly well done, considering that none of the original cast of actors who were used in the original cartoons are actually present here for this one. Entertainment Hacker, what's going on, bruh? It's good to see you. And as far as Prime, the actor that they used for Prime and the voice for Prime is very, very well done. He is not picture perfect to Peter Cullen, but he is so close to that same tone of voice and the style of voice that it really doesn't make that big of an impact in changing this guy from Peter Cullen. I would have probably rather have heard Peter Cullen in there, but this guy does a very good job. And some of the other voices like Shockwave sounds a little bit different, but once again, it's really not that bad in retrospect. Now, the guy who's doing the voice of Megatron is pretty good. It's damn good. And some of the action sequences that you see in the first two episodes, yeah, you feel like they're really in a war. I mean, you get that feeling like there are real stakes in there. You see a couple of these Cybertronians go down with severe damage and severe wounds where you're not sure if they're actually going to make it. A few of them don't make it. So I'm going to leave that out there without really spoiling anything. Is it anybody important? Well, you're going to have to see for yourself. There's also a few other things going on with the struggle of leadership in the Decepticons with the Seekers. And that is a bit of a surprise for myself when I seen who was actually in charge of the Seekers, because most people that know the Transformers are going to think, hey, it's Starscream, but guess what? It's not Starscream. I'm not going to tell you who it is. It's a bit of a shocker, and it's actually pretty cool that the way they've done it. Now, the storyline kind of like semi follows what they did in the IDW comics, and this is what I really thought when I first seen the preview trailers for this series. They follow the IDW comics almost to a T. And it's actually very well done. It's the early IDW comics, and you know what? I cannot be happier from what I've seen so far from this series from Netflix. I am more than shocked that it was as good as it was. And I was very hopeful going into this, and I was not. I was not disappointed. Now, there were some people that worried about some of the female Autobots that they showed in some of the trailers, that maybe that this was going to take some of the ridiculousness that we see in a lot of entertainment where it's, woman first and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? You didn't get that feeling. You got strong female Autobot characters who were not overwhelming and were still there to show off their strength as well without being overpowering, without, hey, I'm woman, hear me roar nonsense. You didn't get none of that. Now, granted, this is only the first 2 episodes. I doubt very much it's going to change much from there, but you never know. But so far, so good. This show is definitely worth a watch if you haven't already checked it out yet. Keck44, how you doing, buddy? It's good to see you. Now, a lot of the things that Prime is going through early on, he's kind of like resembling the leader that you've seen in the early IDW comics, where he wasn't totally sure of himself and he was still looking to others for, that strength and that ability to go on, questioning his decisions as well. Because you know what? If you're in a war situation, there's no way that you're going to follow every single leader blindly, unless, of course, you're the Decepticons, because Megatron ruled through power and they didn't have much of a choice but to obey unless they want to get obliterated. And you kind of get that feel with Megatron in this one as well. Now, granted, they did borrow heavily from IDW with Megatron and his backstory of being a miner in the mines and his rebellion against what he said was the autocracy. You get all that in the first 2 episodes, hinting on all that stuff from the IDW comics. So if you are not an IDW comics fan and you have not read any of the IDW comics, you are going to get a very good glimpse into what they did in those comics with this series. It is worth the watch. I'm serious. I would not say this. Now, I am a longtime Transformers fan from G1, from before G1, when it was still the micro change lines, and even before that, when it was Micro Man, before all that stuff changed and wound up becoming the Transformers later on. And I'm telling you, everything that I've seen in this series is really good, and it is really worth the time to take and invest and watch this series. Now, if you don't have Netflix, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should, get a free trial and just check out this series at the very least. You will not regret it. If you are a Transformers fan, I do not believe you will regret it, at least not from what I've seen so far. Now, a lot of the other things that they do show is they do show a lot of the other types of Autobots and Decepticons out there that are kind of unnamed. And this is one of the other things that they did in the IDW comics. You're going to see some of the characters that you knew from the old G1, but you're also going to see other characters that are unnamed. And they're almost like cannon fodder, it seems, in a way, but hey, you know what? If you're going to have a big war and you're going to show stakes, there's going to have to be more than just the players that you know in order to wind up having losses on both sides without affecting any of the key roles that are going to be progressing in the storyline. And Ultra Magnus. Some of the scenes with Ultra Magnus. Now, this is the only thing that kind of bugs me a little bit. They actually portray Ultra Magnus slightly different than we've seen him in the IDW comics, in the original Marvel comics, or what we've seen of him in the 1986 movie and the follow-up cartoon that came out afterwards by Sunbow. He does have a little bit more of a solemn approach to everything, to the point where he's almost ready to give up, it seems. That is very different from the Ultra Magnus in most of the other formats, where they almost present him as a bit of a, almost like a lawman in a way, where he's very no nonsense and he does not take no for an answer, and there's no retreat, no surrender in his philosophy. This is a bit different here. Now, because of what transpires in the first and second episode, maybe that's going to change, and we're going to see more of the classic Ultra Magnus from the IDW comics and the Marvel comics and the Sunbow cartoon. But that is yet to be seen. But even then, with that being said, the way that they portrayed Ultra Magnus and all the backstories that they were talking about and other characters they hinted on that were in the Sunbow cartoon as well, it's amazing. There are a lot of callbacks to all the original characters and the original lore, not only partially from Sunbow, but everything that they did in IDW. I'm actually really excited to see where they're going to take this series from here. So far, with the war shaping up, it's not even so much that you're getting the very beginning of the war. You seem to be getting the war midway through, where there's already been heavy casualties and there's already been losses on both sides. So this is not a very opening sense of a beginning of the war. This is something that is already underway, and you're kind of falling into the middle of it, where both sides are trying to figure out a way to end the war. Megatron, of course, wanting to do it by brute force, and Optimus trying to find a way to win and survive with all his fellow Cybertronian Autobots. You also get to see the character of Bumblebee in this one as well. And the role he plays is kind of different than what I expected. But once again, this is something that they kind of veered off from, not only from the Marvel Comics and the IDW, but of course, every other iteration that they've had of Bumblebee so far. There was a slight different take on him in this one. But once again, it was well done, and it presents him in a different way than you've ever seen, while still keeping to the true core values of what the original toy and the character were. Anyway, guys, I'm trying to keep this one fairly short. I just want to give you a nice review to kind of get you interested in it if you aren't already, just to kind of bring you up to speed. If it's worth to go see this one, if it's worth to turn on Netflix, get a free trial and watch it if you don't already have Netflix. And I could tell you without a doubt, so far from what I've seen, it is definitely worth the watch. You should definitely go check this one out. Anyway, guys, obviously, many of you are going to be catching this on replay. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you excited to see this one after hearing that it's not a woke piece of trash? are you happy to hear that they didn't like destroy all the characters' lore and they actually, for the most part, stuck to everything that was in further iterations of the franchise? Leave me those comments to let me know what you think about that. And of course, if you like what you heard and what you've seen so far, go ahead and destroy that like button for me. And if you are new to the channel and you just dropped by because you heard somebody was reviewing the Netflix Transformers Siege cartoon, hey, if you like what you heard and what you've seen, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And anyway, guys, that's all I have for this one. And I will catch you next time. Later, y'all.